Welcome to DONNE TALKS, provided to you by DONNE, Women in Music. I am your host, Gabriella Di Laccio, and in every episode I interview guests who are amplifying change, people who are using their voices and their positions to create bigger impact in our society. Today's guest is Edwina Dunn. Edwina is a data science entrepreneur who has always been fascinated by people's stories and motivations. As the co-founder of worldwide loyalty programs like Tesco's Club Card, Edwina knows firsthand what it feels like to work in a male-dominated industry and what it takes to navigate the many obstacles women have faced.
People are always talking about the qualities of a leader. There is a leader and they have to have a bit of everything. You know, they have to be humble and they have to be charismatic and they have to be wise and they have to be funny and they have to be caring. And the truth is, no one has all of those qualities, no one. And actually, I'm a believer of very much of putting two people who are opposite together. I think two together is the equivalent of three. It's not 1 and 1 equals 2. It's 1 and 1 equals 3. That is why diversity is so good, because you do need different perspectives. You need different ideas.
Edwina is also the founder of The Female Lead, an educational charity dedicated to finding the factors that limit women's choices and fulfillment and amplifies their voices in order to drive change and improve economic outcomes. Edwina Dunn, thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you for your time. How are you anyway?
I'm very well, Gabriella. It's lovely to see you again, and I'm delighted to have this chat with you today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So I have many titles for you: data science entrepreneur, OBE, pioneer, activist, role model. And, I could go on. You're such an amazing woman. I want to know, what was Edwina, the teenager Edwina, thinking at the time? Were you dreaming of all these things? How did it all started?
Oh, no, not at all. I don't know, it's very kind of happy-go-lucky. I grew up, I went to a good school. I had a family where my mother was stay at home. My father was an electrical engineer. He built power stations. They spent a few years in Brazil. Which is why I have such a great affection for Brazil. But no, I was very carefree. I had my friends. I don't think I worked very hard. And honestly, I thought I'd grow up, get married, have children, and that would be it. And that is honestly how I set my expectations back then.
Really?
Nothing wrong with any of that, by the way, because that's exactly what my mother did. But I never dreamt of an alternative. I think that's why I feel so strongly that we need to tell stories of how women find themselves in exciting roles and exciting careers in the future, because I don't think many of us really dare to dream them at the time as a teenager.
Yes, that's really interesting, because normally when you hear stories of, people like yourself, you always imagine, oh no, they knew exactly what they wanted to do. They had this vision. They worked really hard from day one. It was like it was supposed to happen. So it's really interesting that you actually ended up in this amazing journey that you have built.
No, I didn't do my homework. I was a very bad student, and
Let's not encourage that.
No. I mean, I had a second chance, I think, and I didn't work hard until I went to work, and suddenly all the lights went on for me, and I thought, this is really fun. I'm doing something that I'm good at. And I hadn't felt that before. I hadn't discovered that I could be really good at something.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I did and the harder I worked, the more I discovered that, you know, I enjoyed it. And the more I enjoyed it, the better I became. So that was really what set me alight.
And what was your first job?
My first job was all about, it was really the very early stages of data and technology. We took the census from the UK, which is like millions of records. So it's every adult in the UK, and it was recorded, you know, and information about, you know, age, sex, what kind of house, how many children, quite dry data. And at the time, it's so long ago, it was all kept on magnetic tape and it was all held separately. And so we were the first company that bought a huge commercial computer. We had to bring it in through the window in High Holborn. We stopped all the traffic on a Sunday. It was so huge. And we needed this computer to process this data. And from that, it was so exciting because we were then able to do what market research had been doing manually, which is how many people live or work in an area that's like half a mile from a store or a high street or something like that. So it was very, very radical, saved a huge amount of time, and it was big innovation. So it was really early data and technology, and the computers were still quite weak. But because we were the first, we were pioneering, and suddenly we discovered this era of using big data by using computing. And that was really the beginning. And that's where, you know, I got, I don't know, transported into this new world of excitement.
That's fantastic. And then was that in the 80s when you became the youngest female vice president? Is that for the California Analysis Centers Incorporated? Did I say right?
You said it right, and it's not easy to say. Yes.
No, I know.
Californian Analysis.
California Analysis. I'm sure there is a shorter version for it.
yeah, but it sounds rude in some countries.
Yeah, no, I know.
So
I didn't try it.
I've avoided saying it. But it was a big company. It was 2,500 people. And we were just this tiny little outpost. So actually, and I must tell you something else, because I also walked in, and on my first day, it was such a small team. We were only 5. We became 7 people. But one of the guys there, I thought was lovely. And I married him a year later. So there was a bit of a love interest that probably helped me be even more excited by starting work.
Well, it's always good when love always helps.
Love helps.
But so from the beginning of your career, you were always in a male-dominated world. Yes. And then you probably still are now.
Yeah, I've always been in a male-dominated world. And
how was it? How did you make it work? Because did you have to? I mean, I don't know. Everything you do now is exactly to have more role models for women, and I believe this generation and the future generations are so lucky. But back not that long ago, even in my profession, it wasn't that common to have a conductor, for example. Even now is not common at all. Is starting. So we are in the 21st century, but sometimes it doesn't feel in some areas. But your area is until today very male dominated.
Well, yes, technology, retailing, and boardrooms. Those three combinations are just stating almost without exception a sea of suited males, which is essentially my entire career. I think I believed in what I did, and I think it just overrode. You know, I so wanted to communicate the power of what we could do, and I realized that as I spoke, as I tried to communicate the power of what can be achieved with data and insight and classifying consumers and all of those things, I realized that I said things slightly differently to men. I could see sometimes the desire to understand, but sometimes almost a quizzical look where they hadn't quite followed the way I said something. And I had to work quite hard to remove a lot of the extras I think one tends to put in as a female.
Yeah.
And, you know, I would try to strip it down to the facts in order to keep their attention. And I was aware of that. I'm not sure how successful I was, but I was aware of it very much. And, you know, because I so wanted them to follow and to hear. But I think women do say things quite often differently to men. And that, I believe, is still quite a challenge. I don't know the science behind it, but, you know, I think we put in more words and more expression.
Oh, definitely more words. That's what my husband always says to me. Can you say it with few words? Just give me the short version. But I think when you're passionate about something, you always use more words. That's my feeling, at least.
Yes, it's almost the opposite of how best to communicate.
Yes.
Yes, and I think it has, you know, I have therefore got quite a sort of steady and slightly slow speaking manner, because I learned over those years to slow it down, because I could see people weren't following. And I'm not particularly brainy, so I knew it wasn't because I was a genius. That was my husband at the time. So really, I had to just find a different approach. But anyway, it seemed to work in the end.
Oh, it certainly worked. And then you left with your husband to start your own company after.
Yeah, which sounds very easy and is, again, as if it was planned.
And that was my question. Was it easy? No, I don't think it was.
It was one of the darkest times I recall. And I think, I mean, I was so blissfully naive. I mean, my husband was working for someone who really was an American lawyer, and he didn't really love or understand the business that we were in, and they wouldn't invest in the next idea. And so he became really quite unhappy. And I remember my sister saying, you know, Clive's really unhappy. Is everything okay? And I thought, I hadn't really noticed it so much. But, you know, when you're working for someone who doesn't feel and understand and invest in what you do, it's really hard. So in the end, I said, you must go. You must be happy. You must do what you believe in. I said, don't you worry. I'll stay, and I'll pay the bills. I'll pay the mortgage, because we'd just taken out this really big mortgage. We thought we were on, you know, we thought we were going places. And then when they eventually accepted his resignation, they fired me 10 minutes later. So for being his wife, I mean, could you believe it? Can you imagine getting away with it now? But they could, and they paid me just enough, because awards were capped at that time. And I felt such a sense of moral outrage. You know, I'd always worked hard. I was passionate, I believed. That sense of indignation and anger was the best incentive I've ever had. And I thought, I will show you. If you think that was good and you fired me, wait till you see what I do next. And honestly, it was the biggest motivation. And, you know, we worked so hard. And all the time was in the back of our mind, we're going to build something bigger and better. Because, that's what you do, isn't it? When you're hurt, when someone has affronted your sense of fair play, it's kind of what you do, or it's certainly what I did. And so it was, they came after us as well. They sued us. And it was really, we honestly thought we were going to lose our house, our livelihood. There were really, really dark moments. But when you look at someone that you work with or someone that you're married to, and you realize if the worst happens, you can rebuild.
Yeah.
And you know that.
Yeah.
The power that flows from that is like nothing else on earth. And actually, when you reach that point and say, if we lose everything, we'll just start again. When you hit that moment, it frees you. And suddenly from there, you're capable of amazing things.
Yeah, and you're always stronger afterwards.
Yes. Yes.
But I'm very fascinated because I'm a little bit like that. I mean, I had many people who told me that, you will not achieve this, or you're, we all have these people in our lives. And somehow I always feel there's no options for us artists, because you either are an artist or you're unhappy. So it's kind of, you always feel like you have no choice. You almost feel like a fire inside of you when somebody denies you that chance, or say, no, you're not going to do that. And you just say, watch me.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Exactly. And I think you need that strength to really succeed. You can't turn away at the first knock or the first criticism or the first hurdle. And I do think sometimes that people who've always been the top, always been the best, they struggle the most because no one has ever said to them, you failed. No one said that. Frankly, by the time I got there, I was quite used to it. And actually, it does make you really, really resilient. And there's something to be said for that, because failure is the way we learn the most. And, it's something I think we have to turn to our advantage and be stronger. And be respectful of the fact that, you're less critical of other people when they fail. Because I think, again, the kindness and support of others is so incredibly important.
Yes, definitely. And I think being a business owner or a self-employed person is almost like our life as an artist, because we kind of are in charge of our own business in a way. It's very rare that we have regular salaries, so it's always an adventure. So rejection comes on a weekly basis, in our lives. And it's so important to remember that you have to find the reasons why you're doing, number one, and continue to develop, I guess, as a professional, as an artist. Because
I think being an artist is even harder, if I may add that element, because for me, I've always hidden behind data and evidence and numbers, the facts. And I think the facts are such a wonderful defense, because you just say, no, blue isn't prettier than pink. These are the facts, it's the data. It's yes or no. And I do think for artists, where it is so subjective, it's even harder.
It's really funny because I was very good at maths at school. I love maths. Maybe I'm still good at maths, just don't do it. I love numbers, fascinated, and music and numbers go really well together. And for me, maths is still the word that I love the most, because it's logical, it's precise, there's no doubt. So I always had this mathematical way of looking and calculating. So when I decided I was doing architecture, I decided to change everything and become a singer, full-time classical singer. And
wow.
And then I had this perfect equation, right? Okay, you want to be a classical singer, south of Brazil. You don't know anybody who's doing that right now. So what you have to do, you have to study with the best teacher in the country. You have to become the best singer in the country, or the best singer you can be, because that's your only chance. And then if you do that, if you work hard, that's it, you're gonna make it. Oh my God, it's so not the way this world goes, because there's so many other variants in our in our life as artists, which really challenge my. I love data, I love logic like things as well, but anyway, that's not how it works.
Well, I think we all love the things that we can rely on. And I think, at this time, particularly of so much uncertainty, we do look to the data, we do look to the facts, because it's the only thing that we have in front of us. So, and I think that's why we all feel so out of control at the moment, because all we can do is look at this data, and it's limited, isn't it? It's not telling us what's going to happen. It's just saying, well, this is what's already happened. So
exactly.
It's some element of comfort, but it's not enough. No, except thank God for the scientists.
Oh yes.
Finding
my gosh.
the immune. I mean, what joy. And don't we all feel such great respect for them all now? And
oh my God, deeply. Can you imagine the amount of hours all this time, all this dedication?
And the scientists that found it first were a married couple, weren't they? Which I thought was lovely. It kind of.
If you're enjoying this podcast, there are 3 simple things you can do to support our work. First, subscribe. This way you will never miss an episode. Second, tell about us to a friend or a family member. You always have someone to share the stories of this interview. Third, give us a review on iTunes or whatever other channel you subscribe. This way you will be helping others to find our podcast. You mentioned something, and now that you talk about capital in one of your interviews, the power of 2 theory.
Yes.
You want to tell us about that?
Well, thank you. Yes, it is one of my favorite theories. I do, but people are always talking about the qualities of a leader. There is a leader, and they have to have a bit of everything. They have to be humble, and they have to be charismatic, and they have to be wise, and they have to be funny, and they have to be caring. And the truth is, no one has all of those qualities. No one. And actually, I'm a believer of very much of putting 2 people who are opposite together, not necessarily in a marriage, but, in a working relationship. And I think 2 together is the equivalent of 3. It's not 1 and 1 equals 2. It's 1 and 1 equals 3, because with opposites, you just get this halo effect of all the things they cover for each other, and they expand into them. And, always in my business, I've looked to put people together in mini teams, sort of 2 people, and given them huge tasks, probably unfairly, when they were still quite young, and said, go run a country, go manage an enormous multi-million pound dollar, client. And they would rise to the challenge, and they would freak, they would be scared. But in their own words, they would say afterwards, never have I grown so much, never have I realized what I was capable of. And I think it is that sense that you've almost got someone there protecting your back in a way you could never imagine before. So for me, I think a lot of this leadership theory is not wrong, but I think outdated. And I think that is why diversity is so good, because you do need different perspectives, you need different ideas. And actually, I think a lot of innovation and creativity in any field comes from putting 2 very different ideas together, and then suddenly there's something magic that happens.
Yes, I really like that. Thank you for sharing sharing again, because I think now sometimes you read books about great leaders, and sometimes you feel so small because you feel, I will never be able to do all that. So it kind of frees you to, I totally believe in collaboration. You know, I can't ever imagine I know everything or I can do everything well. Like, I certainly can't. So it's
Yeah.
always positive to have somebody there with you to challenge you as well, which is not easy sometimes. You don't want to be challenged.
No, but you know, and I think having someone with you, challenging you, helping you, is not weakness. And it's so often described as, oh, you needed help. You've come with someone else. Is that because you don't know and you're not good enough? And I think this is completely wrong. I think it shows confidence. It shows respect. And, you know, I genuinely believe that combination of two people gives you the very, very best moment when you have that moment, because you got to people's thoughts and processes around it in the moment or even afterwards. So I think a lot of old theory is exactly that, old theory. And it's quite a, you know, it's just quite a kind of masculine model, which is one all-powerful being telling everybody what to do. Now, you know, I have a son and a daughter. I have no disrespect to either sex, but I think it's outmoded. And I think that's why getting women to an equal level with men and having them work together respectfully and in this collaborative way, I think, you know, is probably the best way we can all move forward and create economic growth after what has been a you know, a bad period for everything and everyone.
We stopped straight in front of the door of the female lead, don't we? 2015, it's a funny year because that was the year when I was actually started planning what I was going to do with all my anger, because I felt quite angry by that point when I discovered so many invisible women in the history of music, which is not only music, of course. What happened for you? What was the inspiration? Because you had been in this, you know, male-dominated world for so long, and then did something click or something happen, or was just a long time dream that you've been planning for a long time, and finally you got the time to do it? Sometimes that's what it takes.
I think that the truth of the story was somehow it was in my subconscious. I originally thought I was going to, I wanted to write a film. I wanted to show what women saw when they looked in the mirror. I wanted to hear stories of what women saw when they looked in the mirror. I was very moved by when you see a child put on a beautiful dress. They go up onto their toes and they twirl. And actually, it doesn't matter if the dress doesn't suit them or it's too big or whatever. They feel like a princess. And we know so often little girls just want to be a princess when they're young. And they're transported and they believe it. And they're up and delighted and happy. And then when teenage years come, then nothing looks right on them. Nothing looks good. You almost see that image in the changing room of shock, horror. I don't look right. I'm not beautiful. And then that continues and it continues. And I was fascinated by it. And the fact that, you know, when you get older, you kind of don't care again a bit. And I love this. And I thought I'd make this beautiful film. And that's what I dreamt of doing. And then I realized it's really hard to make a film, and you have to be really, really good, and you have to write a brilliant script. And then a very
small detail.
I mean, you know, I think by this stage I thought I could do anything. And that's when I came firmly back down to earth with, that is really awful and you failed completely. And luckily at that point, someone I worked with and who knew me quite well said, why don't you stick to what you know? And actually, the stories of truth, real stories, are so much more powerful. They're almost better than ones you can make up. And I thought, you got it. And I'd love to say it was my blindingly good idea, but it wasn't. But I did return to what I knew, which was telling stories of real people. You know, it's a different form of data. A story is still data. It's still, you know, the evidence of a life and how they actually overcame things. So, and I think you and I discovered this idea pretty much at the same time, because you discovered all these amazing women in music and composers and musicians, and amazing. And I thought about all the women whose stories we'd never heard. And yet, you know, I grew up at school hearing about, you know, long dead women. Florence Nightingale, who doesn't know that name? I mean, actually, she was a mathematician, wasn't she?
Yes.
A statistician, which I always find fascinating. But, you know, her and Ada Lovelace and Amelia Earhart, they're the only ones we know. And you know, there are
But did you hear about Dame Stephanie Shirley?
Not then, no, I didn't. And what a formidable, amazing woman she is. So no, all of these incredible women whose stories we're now seeing, they've been there throughout history, as you've seen. And they've just been, you know, whatever that word is, dampened down, put under the covers. I don't know why, but they have. So, this suddenly became like a revelation. And then, you know, and then you start telling stories and you start finding these women, and then you realize there are more and more and more. You don't know where to draw the line. And I remember when I took these first 60 women that we'd found, and I was sharing it with someone quite famous and, you know, yes, famous and very authoritative. And he said to me, why only 60 women? And I said, very good question. I said, it could be 600, could be 6,000, could be 600,000. Where do you stop? But the fact is, they've never been seen before. So you've got to start somewhere. And it is as simple as that. We just started. And now I think we see so many more lives and stories. And, you know, that's really what makes achievement suddenly seem more normal and more equal.
No, it's fantastic. It's such an amazing work that you do.
Thank you.
Through this project. It's so inspirational. And I of course, things are changing. I do believe things are changing. Do you think it's changing fast enough? I asked that. Have you seen that documentary, the Gina Davis documentary? This Changes Everything, it's called.
No, I'm ashamed to say I haven't.
Oh, you should, because I only saw a few weeks ago. I actually have never seen it. And Gina Davis has the Institute of Gender Research. And she did this documentary in 2018, doing a huge research on women in movies, of course, directors. And I was really emotional at some point, because she shows in the documentary that when they had silent movies, women were everywhere. They owned studios, they were directing, they were behind the camera. And then something happens when sound came and they disappeared. And then she points it out, something that I say a lot in this when we talk about women in music and the project, because people come to me now, not that I am an expert, I am just a performer trying to do a small part, and they say, oh, but everything's fine now, you know, women are fine, you can see women, you know, women are in music, this is a problem of the past. And I go, no, it's not. And Gina Davis at some point, she says exactly the same. She said, oh, people see movies now and they see, oh, Captain Marvel or Wonder Woman, or a movie with a Black woman as a protagonist, and they go, oh, okay, this changes everything. And she said, no, it doesn't. It doesn't change everything, because it will only, and I think exactly as you're saying before, I think it will only change almost when it becomes compulsory that people have diversity in all boards, or something like that, because of course your project is immensely huge, and of course we see a lot of change, especially in young women, and positive role models for young women. We have so many more right now, and through the internet and projects like yours, they have so much more visibility. But is it changing fast enough? That's my question.
No, not at all. No, it's a complete myth. I mean, it's really amazing how many really intelligent people say to me, yeah, but lots of women are going to university and they get the same number of degrees as boys. And like, yeah. And what happens then? Yeah. And then what happens mid-career? You know, do women stay in their jobs? Well, who's home looking after the children? Who's home looking after the elderly parents? Who's doing the in-between jobs of collecting at school or whatever needs doing? And it has not changed. In fact, there are little encouragement bars in certain places. We can see some blips, some peaks, but they're not sustained, and there's really been no shift at all. So I think part of the challenge is, and I think it's fair, but part of the challenge is there's now a bit of confusion because we're now talking about minorities that combine a whole series of things. So we've got women. Well, number one, women are not a minority. They're 51% of the population. So actually it's men who are minorities. But we are equally balanced. But then within that, you've got the whole idea of all this intersectionality, and it's all being brought together as if it's all the same challenge and the same problem. And we have to find our way through it. And I don't think anybody wants to be angry, and I don't think anybody wants to blame any particular part of what's causing this, but we do absolutely have to change it, because the weak at the moment are getting weaker. The minorities are getting more minor. And so we almost have gone backwards rather than forwards now. So, that is really my passion with the female lead, to try and see if we can use data and evidence to understand, to really break down some of the myths that we think are true, to find the real truths, and to say, okay, this seems okay, but this part isn't working. And then use, really good minds, well-intentioned people, and also, identify models where people have overcome some of this and have actually implemented, really great company processes, policies, ways of working. The real truth that everybody has to hold on to is the problem is not women. It is not women who need fixing.
No.
It is the process and the policies and some of our societal norms, and that's what needs fixing. So we all need to fix that. It's not a women's problem to be fixed by women. And there's nothing physically wrong with women which makes them in this place, but we have to work out how to do that. So my next program is bringing all the data and evidence, sharing that with everyone, and then starting to work on campaigns where we get people to speak out and to look at where it works, where it's a happier situation, and say, what can we learn from that, and can we mimic it? Can we use this to take us forward into a better place? And that's what I'm hoping we do next year.
That's amazing. Can we do that in the music industry as well then?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a
Because
pretty talented area, isn't it?
I know, but you know what happens is in the music area we have in the arts area or literature, anything. I think it's just exactly the same problem, because you have the historical challenges that women had to go through, of course, and deal with, which incurred into less production, artistic production for centuries and centuries. But you still had many who actually produced many things, or they gave it to their husbands to patent, if they were inventors, or they signed as a man, or composers as well. There's a very famous story about Fanny Mendelssohn and Felix Mendelssohn with the Easter Sonata, which was this beautiful piano sonata, signed F. Mendelssohn. And only 3 years ago, it was discovered it was written by Fanny, his sister. And it was
Wow.
it was this massive, and now we don't know how many other pieces were. And then in the music world, composers, historical ones, many of them were like, oh, she is the sister of Mozart, she is the wife of, and now we are getting some of the stories. But then they were removed from history, and then now we're trying to bring them to history. But you deal with two types of people. One, the people who think they know everything. They are big people in big high positions. Of course I
Mhm.
will know all the repertoire, I am an artistic director of XYZ. So they don't even they're not necessarily, they don't have a prejudice, but they don't really think there's much more to know. And there's so much ignorance in the artistic world, in terms of knowing what was in the past and actually knowing what's happening right now. And then of course you have the prejudice ones. which
Yeah, yeah. Well, but Gabriella, I remember a moment where I was at this function, industry function, with all the great and the good. And I was talking to this very, very senior man who's head of a huge organization. And I was doing my normal little, oh, data and technology is so exciting. And he looked at me, and I think I'd said, and we will have data strategies and they will lead us forward into better places. And he looked at me and he just laughed and he said, data will never be strategic.
what?
I wish I could find him now and say, what do you think now? And the reason I raise this point,
Does he know who you are? Do you think he still remembers?
I really hope so, because he was
Yes,
so
listen to her now.
he was so patronizing. I remember it really hurt deep. And, but the reason I say that is that there are always people like that who will say, no, 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 this will never be the case. This is the way it is. And we can change that. And that's what our journey is about, to actually bring the evidence of this to the fore, so that actually it becomes, yeah, of course, data and technology is strategic now. And of course it always was, and I always knew it was, and that's what we want people to say. We know there are great, hugely talented females, artists, composers, musicians. We want people to say that, yes, it's obvious, because we will bring the evidence and the stories and the data.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
We can stay here forever. I will end your last question. Well, would like to end with a challenging question. So I think when you are a business person, part of your job is to make sure that you convince people that you're good at what you do. And, you have a lot of proactivity as well. You don't simply expect the phone to ring. You have to make things happen. But I think we as artists, before I was mentioning, our challenge is we never see ourselves as a business. So we don't have this sense of selling ourselves, because it feels so wrong to us. You spend, especially in classical music, in any music, but classical music, it's such a you're almost like an athlete. The dedication, the years of discipline, the years of going to bed early, after a concert because you have to sing again tomorrow, in my case.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't become a classical musician because you're going to be a millionaire, you're going to be famous. You become because you love what you do and you want to do that for your passion. And the last thing is our mind. Our minds is, oh, how am I going to sell myself tomorrow when, what am I doing? We don't want to have to think about that. We want to think about, are we doing this to the best of our capacity? But we have such a challenge now because the musicians are struggling everywhere. If you played in an orchestra, what are you doing right now? People with jobs. Some people who played solo maybe have a bit easier in terms of how they can be creative and do things. But also we have a problem that culture is not number one priority at the moment. There's so many other problems going on.
Mm.
And in people's lives. And sadly, I don't really see any investment in reminding society how precious art is and how powerful it is in our world, and how much it gives people in so many different moments. You see orchestras, in the south of Brazil, you see those children become those amazing musicians just because they were given that opportunity to feel that music. So what would the pioneer, entrepreneurial Edwina do right now if she was an artist? Told you it was a challenge. I told you it was a challenge.
Well, you see, the thing I would consider is that when you're really brilliant at something, you see the differences and nuances, the difficulties, the genres, all of that. But when you come from outside looking in, all you see is someone with a skill you can't even imagine. You can't begin to imagine what it must be like to open your mouth and something beautiful come out, or that you play something and it's beautiful. And so I would think about the idea of the power of two. And I would think about a way in which you could take the skills that you have as artists and put them together with someone who's very good at business and selling, not an agent, but another talent pool, and say, how can we make each other's talent pool work better? How can your business acumen and your network help? And how can our gorgeousness and creativity help you look more interesting and exciting? And actually, by putting that together, create something that's not been created before. Create something that crosses the bridge between highly functional, highly managed, highly corporate, with totally beautiful and artistic, and both adapt a little bit, but create something really new. Most people who are in the corporate world know that they're boring and that their offer is often a bit dull. I mean, they know that because it's like, oh, you've got jargon, you deal with, lots and lots of technical bits. I don't like any of it. People know that. So how do you make it more beautiful? It's like in data and technology, the new way of doing it is data visualization. You create artistic pictures of data because it brings it alive. Well, imagine instead of a picture, music translates from data and algorithms.
I knew it was going to be a good question.
Well, because we have all our senses, and actually quite often we only are good at one or two. And then when you put four together, or five, something incredible happens. So what combination would yield the most excitement, the most attention, and would be a calling card for both partners in that kind of collaboration. So data visualization is really the new thing, infographics, visuals. But, I remember Fantasia. I remember seeing Fantasia. My son fell in love with Fantasia. I hope he doesn't listen to this. Don't talk about me. But I remember it brought film and music together in a way I'd never seen before. And, it was just very, very clever. And you need to find your Fantasia, I think.
Thank you so much for your time. Oh, last question. What's the first thing you're going to do when all this is over?
Oh, go and hug all my friends.
I know, hugs.
I mean,
oh my God, it's true.
It's awful. There is nothing else that matters. You can talk to them, you can ring them, but you can't hug them. And there's something so missing in our world at the moment. Look, we're both going like that.
I know.
Because we have to touch each hand, because it's the only touch that we have at the moment. So, So we'll do a metaphoric grab across the screen.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
For listeners wanting to learn more about Donne and everything that we do, please visit our website on www.donne-uk.org. If you enjoyed the podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, and while you're there, it will be great if you could rate and review the show, and spread the word on social media. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to being with you in our next episode.